So, hello, welcome. This, of course, is Headlocks and Headphones. My name is Martin Anderson. I'm going to be with you for around about the next hour. This is one of those weeks where we haven't watched a whole heap of wrestling, but what we do have is some analysis of the roster draft. I'm not joined by Zoe Styles this week, although we are going to give her a wee call later on to find out who won between myself and her in our roster draft picks. Now, before we get there, we are going to talk about the wrestling news from this week. We are going to talk, like I say, about the roster draft, and we also have words from our sponsor. Let's just say we're all looking forward to that, aren't we? The wrestling news. This is probably my favorite section of the show because what we get to do here is we get to actually look at the events of the week and maybe some stories that crop up of things from the past. So that's kind of where we're going to open up here. So appearing on the Hannibal TV Q&A, Chris Masters revealed that somebody tried to get CM Punk to drink. Now, I love doing this. So let's actually just read out the direct quote from Chris Masters. Vince was trying to peer pressure CM Punk into having a drink, and I wouldn't really know what to do either if I was CM Punk, because part of me, maybe Vince is testing him to see if you get CM Punk to break his will, and then that'll make Vince lose respect for him, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And then eventually, so CM Punk wouldn't drink, and then eventually it went from CM Punk drinking to now, hey, if you're such a shooter, CM Punk, how about you take on... Now, so obviously, the way that Chris Masters verbiage there, he's speaking off the cuff, right? But there was this belief that somebody could convince CM Punk to drink. So it's kind of great to see that that's not actually what happened. The second part of this, the last part, hey, if you're such a shooter, they tried to get CM Punk in against Shelton Benjamin and Carlito and then several others. And it was an attempt because CM Punk kind of portrayed this shooter gimmick. What I think is really cool is, okay, he lost his legitimate fights in the UFC, but he got paid to fight. How many guys in WWE would love to be in a position where they could work for the UFC? CM Punk perhaps was too old to start the journey that he did. He'd done that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I think CM Punk would have had a very respectable MMA career. But to hear that the boss of the company on a flight to the tribute to the troops over in the Middle East tried to get CM Punk to drink, and even with that peer pressure, CM Punk was like, nah, not interested. How many of us would have that same guts to do that? If a boss asks you to do something, you are kind of more inclined to do it because you look up to them. That's what peer pressure is. Now, let's move on from that because obviously we all know CM Punk doesn't drink. Let's move on to some other news. Now, the GCW, the collective event this past weekend, revealed some people had some positive COVID tests. So AC Mack and Cabana Man Dan announced they both received positive results and faced 14 days in quarantine. AC Mack tweeted, "So yes, get tested, guys, before and after every show. Got tested yesterday, and unfortunately, the results came back positive. No shows, no training, no hanging out, no anything for a while. Champ down. Please get tested." Also, any Netflix suggestions? Well, if you want a Netflix suggestion, Beyond the Mat is on Netflix now. Go out of your way to watch it. You can thank me later. Looking at the American positive results, if you go to @AC_Mac, the slip that you get back, it's actually basically done in pen. So it says positive and negative with a little blurb on each, and there's a little checkbox. And whoever gave him back his results basically put an X on positive. So it's not an official system. It's literally done by pen. For me, I don't know why, but I thought something as serious as this might be digital. So a digital. Does that seem like a big deal? I just think somebody could easily just put the X in the wrong spot, whereas a computer system is more likely to get things correct, unless that computer system's been done in Scotland or the UK for that matter in the past few years. Trying not to get too political. But as well as AC Mack, you also had Cabana Man Dan, who basically tweeted the same sentiment, but his is digital. Okay, guys, please get tested anytime after an event and before another one. Encloses my 6th negative COVID test I've taken last week. To ensure the safety of others going into this weekend's events and training, I got tested again today, and unfortunately, it came back positive. So there's a very, very big thing there. is these guys are getting tested all the time, and they get so many negative tests, which is great, but it only takes one, and then they're having to isolate for 14 days. And I know that the restrictions in America, there's certain places with slightly different guidelines. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next wee while. I know Retribution apparently have been off TV because of positive tests within the WWE system. So this is not a WWE problem. This is not an independent wrestling struggling to cope problem. This is just what's happening in the world right now. And I have seen people online kind of attacking WWE for allowing people to still work. But then you've got the indies who are now going out and working as well. I guarantee you, not one of these promoters is wanting to endanger these people's lives. They want to put on shows. They want to give these people a chance to earn money. Because at the end of the day, there is still independent wrestlers in America that don't have a second job. They rely on this to make money. And yeah, they may be crashing on people's sofas to kind of get by, but they're busting their ass to try and get to that next level. And you know what? Some of these guys that are on the indies right now, some of these guys that have had to go without work for 7 or 8 months are the same guys that in 10 years' time will be considered like CM Punk. They'll be the guys headlining WrestleMania. They'll be the guys WWE are turning to. The next Seth Rollins is on the indies waiting to be snapped up. I just think this 2020 has just been horrible for wrestling. I mean, you just need to look at the product. And I know some people are fanboys WWE. Some people are fanboys AEW. You cannot tell me the product is better with no fans. So, I want to repeat their message as well. Stay safe, everybody. No matter what happens, don't go breaking the rules, because as much as we do like to be rebels, the rules are kind of there for a reason. And if you break them, I'm more than positive here in the UK, if you break the rules and you catch something, you'll more than happily take advantage of the NHS because it's free. Maybe you'd take the rules a bit more seriously if you had to pay for all this shit. Not that I'm getting angry about this, because you know what? Rebellion's okay. But what I dislike is when you have people who just rebel for the sake of it. And I think that's sometimes what we have in this country, especially do you know what? That's what we have in quite a lot of things. We have people who go out of their way to rebel just because they can. And you know what? As much as I appreciate rebellion, I don't want people to get sick. That's why I've been following the rules as best as I can. Have I breached one or two every now and again? Possibly. But, stick to as many of them as you can. Certainly, I think when full lockdown was in, I stuck to all of them. But recently, I just found out that at work, we have to wear masks all the time. The only time we don't have to wear a mask anymore is if we're sitting down. So apparently, if you're in the staff room and you're sitting down, you can't get COVID, so you can wear your mask. You don't have to wear your mask. Whereas if you stand up in that exact same spot, you need to wear a mask because you can get COVID. I get it. Sometimes the rules don't make sense. But if we follow them and we get through this, great. If we don't follow them and this continues, then what if we could have changed things? Anyway, let's not go down that lesson route. One of the cool things this week, Daniel Bryan has announced that he is making his Thunderdome debut on SmackDown, which tonight, if you're watching this on the day that the show airs, he was drafted to SmackDown. He was one of the first picks as well for SmackDown. I really do appreciate Daniel Bryan's work. I think it's going to be great to have him back. Certainly, the roster draft has shaken things up enough that Daniel Bryan's got some fresh opportunities. I'd love to see Daniel Bryan as one of the faces of the company. I think he's somebody that could do very, very well pushing Roman Reigns and having good matches with people like Big E, getting Big E ready for that next step. Now, talking of the next step, WWE are a touring brand. They have been since the day I can remember. And one of the things that's interesting is obviously we've had no live shows since March, and that's resulted in no pay-per-views with audiences, no TV shows with audience. WWE obviously want to get fans back in as quickly as is safe. So reports coming out that the live event loop, now if you don't know what the live event loop is, the live event loop, for example, with Raw is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. The live event loop for SmackDown is broadly similar, but the overall WWE loop, this is the schedule. It's Friday TV, house show Saturday, Sunday, possibly a pay-per-view on the Sunday, and then Monday is TV. Now, there is reports coming out from the WrestleVotes Twitter that that schedule won't return at least until 2022. At least that's what WWE are planning. So it means already that some of the live events that people have had their tickets transferred from one event to the other most likely won't be going ahead. Some of the events in 2021 here in the UK look like not being honoured. I think they're going to cancel the tickets in the next couple of weeks and people will have to buy again. But at the end of the day, I mean, if things aren't safe, there's no point in just putting shows on for the sake of it. WWE have tried to entertain us through the pandemic, but at the same time, as much as we all want to go and see wrestling, is it worth it if there's still a danger? Whether you believe that the danger is real or not, because let's get down to this. There's people who believe that COVID's fake, and that's fine. There's people who believe that it's real, and at the end of the day, if people at least respect each other's opinions, if you don't believe it's real, then fine. But for those who want to do something to stay safe on the off chance, just even 1% chance they might catch it, let's not allow it to breed faster than it has to. So for me, this is something that could change. It looks like the plan is 2022 before shows return. But if things get back to normal, if there's a vaccine that works and the anti-vaxxers shut their damn mouths, if there is something that comes in that allows these shows to return early, you bet your bottom dollar WWE are going to want your money. The shows will return. And as a result, so will the AEW stuff, so will Impact, so will all these other companies. And importantly, so will the UK scene in more than a very small and limited capacity that we've had. Certainly, the absence of ICW has been very noticeable for some people. But that's given an access to the back catalogue. So there are certain people that ICW were trying to build pre-pandemic. People are getting a chance now to go and see their story leading up to there. So when things do return, we may see a refreshed and injury-free roster in most companies, which would be very good to see. Now, talking of injury-free, Wade Barrett says he's open to the idea of returning, but would need at least 3 months to knock off the ring rust. What's quite interesting, though, he works for WWE. He has access to a performance center either here in the UK or in America that is incredible, with talent there that would work with him and give him the opportunity to perform at a very high level. If he wants to knock out the ring rust, he could not be working for a better company right now than the WWE. I know people say, well, AEW would probably push him higher in the card. That could be true, but AEW don't have the level of facilities that would get Wade Barrett in a position to hit the ground running. Me personally, I'm kind of excited by Wade Barrett. He's somebody that I really like. He's somebody I've had personal conversations with as well. Not bragging about that, but he was very nice in our personal conversations. So it's great to see somebody like him in the discussion for being able to come back. I'd love for him to actually get that run he was meant to get before John Cena screwed him over. We won't go down that. That's another conspiracy theory. But we do have some stories this week from an interview with BT Sport, where Wade Barrett was talking about Drew McIntyre, and he said, "I used to bully him," admits Barrett in an interview with BT Sport. "Kick the hell out of him, pour canned beans over him. He'd be in the corner crying and begging for mercy." Now, Drew did, of course, almost instantly after this went live, he did reply to it, basically saying, "Anytime you're ready." So that's something that could be quite interesting. These are two guys that know each other. If you've watched the WWE 24 with Drew McIntyre, the second one, the new one, you'll see that Stu Bennett, Wade Barrett, was actually part of the group that got their WWE contracts and were there when Drew was coming in. So it was nice to see that these guys still have that little bit of banter. I had heard that they did briefly live together when Drew moved over to the States. So it's very cool to see that they might go down that route. There was, of course, reports of Tyson Fury versus Drew McIntyre, which would draw a big audience. But if you were to perhaps look at Tyson Fury maybe not being in a position to have that fight, then having Tyson Fury being in the corner of Wade Barrett and helping Wade Barrett get to that position could set up that story and give Drew a couple of matches. Certainly, if we're looking to have a show in England, a show in the United Kingdom somewhere, doing it using Drew McIntyre is definitely the way to go. Something I'm looking forward to. Now, somebody who was looking forward to something this week was John Cena. He got married. I believe this is his second marriage. He didn't marry the Bella because issues. But it is quite interesting. TMZ apparently discovered the legal documents. Now, this makes me think, did TMZ just go into places and search for John Cena, search for Terry Bollea, and see what documents are cropping up? Because that would be quite interesting if that's your job, to just sit and search legal documents. But anyway, John Cena is, of course, married for a second time, and he married, I'm going to butcher this name, Shea Shrayazade. She looks quite nice. Not what I would have expected John to go for, but if he's happy and he's married, then great. Apparently, they've been together since about 2018, so right after John Cena and Nikki Bella split up. But do you know what? If he's happy, then who cares how long they've been together? If you're in a relationship and 3 months down the line you want to get married, then hell yeah, because it's only right for you, and that's, for me, what's important. Now, Matt Hardy says he is 100% healthy and cleared to return. Now, he might be broken, but he says he is back to full health and ready to step back in an AEW ring. He did appear on Dynamite on Wednesday alongside his family, and he told Tony Schiavone he is ready to return. Now, Hardy's time has been interrupted by a mysterious promo featuring a man in a black hood, burning photos of Hardy displayed behind him. Now, Sammy Guevara revealed himself as the mystery man and said he's the one who attacked Matt Hardy earlier. So they are continuing the Guevara and Matt Hardy feud, which obviously we're not going to be talking in depth about AEW this week, because we are going to kind of look at the roster draft as our big thing this week. Matt Hardy, I think he could really help Sammy Guevara. I think in terms of perception, at least, Sammy Guevara has everything in terms of his ability to cut promos, ability to perform. So it'd be interesting to see what Matt Hardy gets out of him long term. It will be interesting to see. Fuck it. It'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see what Matt Hardy can get out of Sammy Guevara long term. The fact that this story is continuing shows that AEW have faith in these two guys together. And do you know what? I've been intrigued. Some of the stuff they've done has been stupid, sloppy even. But at the same time, there is a story there. The older veteran, the young rookie, there is that respect issue there, particularly what happened with Sammy Guevara. Matt Hardy knows Sasha Banks. Matt Hardy is a person who has in the past made foolish mistakes and went too far and possibly shortened his career, cost himself his addictions. He's labeled as being partially down to the physical abuse he took on his body. So Sammy Guevara could be a very good person to latch on to Matt Hardy, at least in some way. I know Sammy's part of the inner circle. I think Matt Hardy having a group of young people would be very interesting on AEW, but we won't go down trying to book the AEW shows. But let's look at something interesting about AEW. They have another tournament, because who doesn't love having tournaments every 3 weeks? Apparently, AEW really do, because this is the 17th tournament in the month of October. I'm exaggerating, of course, but the AEW World Title Eliminator Tournament is start to set next week, and the matches, as will be displayed on screen for you right now: Penta versus Rey Fenix, Kenny Omega versus Joey Janela, Colt Cabana versus Hangman Page, and Wardlow versus Jungle Boy. Now, if you look at the match graphic, what you will see is if you pick the winners, you can easily lead to AEW Full Gear, where you have Kenny Omega versus Hangman Page. That's my call for how this goes. I think Penta will win, Kenny Omega will win on their first matches. You'll have Hangman Page and Jungle Boy win. You'll then have Hangman Page beat Jungle Boy, and then you'll have Kenny Omega win his match, and that's your final, leading to, I want to say Kenny Omega is going to win, so I'm going to put my money on that. Kenny Omega is going to win that and get his title shot. Certainly, if you look at Hangman Page, I think if he is ready to get the title shot, he has to be ready to get the belt. And I don't think he's there. AEW want to talk about long-term storytelling. I think Hangman Page, the drinking thing, there's more to come from that. There has to be a punchline. There has to be a payoff. So I don't think he'll get it, but I think he will be in the final, because that'll be a good pay-per-view quality match. At least it looks like it'll be a good pay-per-view quality match, depending on which version of Kenny Omega shows up. Despite some teasing, Andrade is not going back to NXT or leaving the WWE. He's actually went and had an operation. It's a minor procedure, should be out for around a month, and it looks like he will be called back to Raw when that draft period ends. So he is technically undrafted, but it does look like he will show up on Raw after taking a month off. He did lose to Angel Garza on Raw and then was attacked by Bray Wyatt. Simply a way of writing him off TV. It used to happen all the time. Sami Zayn has said that if he was in charge of WWE, Jey Uso would be winning the World Championship from Roman Reigns. Now, do you know what? It's hard to... I've been a big fan of the Usos for many years. I don't think he is the world title holder. I think he is the ally of the world title holder. But you know what? There's still room for improvement with him, because as a tag wrestler, he was at a certain level. And with his brother being injured, Jay has just reached that extra little bit. And I think he's done really well. I think with a little bit of time, he could actually be the top guy. He's certainly somebody who has the cool factor. And if you've never seen WWE live, the guys, and by guys, I mean guys and girls, but just because of how my brain works, the guys, they get a chance to be a little bit more natural and be themselves. They're a bit unscripted. And the Usos come across really well, both of them. Jey Uso is actually somebody who's probably a slightly better performer, slightly better talker. So that means that he is somebody that could actually rise to the top of that card, particularly with his brother not being ready to wrestle yet. We could see a great benefit in him rising up the card. That doesn't mean Jimmy has to be fired or shunted to the side. Jimmy could still have a very good career. Matt and Jeff Hardy have singles careers that were actually longer than their tag team careers. And people often don't realize that. They've come together a few times since they broke up. They've feuded even. But I don't think anybody would want to see Jimmy and Jay feuding. I just don't think there's any money in that. We've all seen brothers fighting, and these guys are twins. You don't want to see twins fight. I have twins. You don't want to see twins fighting. Now, so in recent months, we have spoken a bit on this show about the Speaking Out movement, and there's one bell end that keeps cropping up. And this bell end decided a few weeks ago to sue the people that made accusations against him for loss of earnings. Even though his loss of earnings in recent months has been down to the pandemic, he's still going to sue these people who've made accusations against him after putting up that rather pathetic little video he did on YouTube. So, excuse me if I come across a little bit less than enthusiastic about this man, but I feel it's important to talk about what he's doing. We're talking about the lollipop guy, the dick flip guy, the guy who said he made $1 million out of basically being the dick flip guy, which for me is a form of sexual harassment. And if you refuse to do this, he actually had a reputation for getting people blacklisted from shows if they wouldn't partake in his gimmick. Anyway, Joey fucking Ryan. He is suing Impact Wrestling for breach of contract after they fired him in June after the huge number of allegations of sexual assault, sexual misconduct, sexual harassment, whatever you want to say. Now, if Joey Ryan wants to come and sue me, I don't have a whole heap of money in the bank. But fair enough, come and sue me if you want. So he has went to the court, the circuit court of Davidson County in Nashville, and Joseph Ryan Meehan claims he signed a contract in September 2019. It was supposed to run until August 31st, 2021. It was breached by Scott D'Amore on June 22nd when the promotion said they would not be booking him anymore due to recent allegations. Following this exchange, Ryan claims he received a formal release notice signed by Anthem president Ed Nordholm, and that his contract termination date was amended to that date, which Impact followed with a public statement announcing they had terminated his contract. Now, Ryan's lawsuit claims Impact's parent company failed to perform as guaranteed in the express language of the contract by failing to follow and abide by the terms of Article 8, Terms and Termination. They failed to adhere to basically releasing him in the correct way. Ryan claims the language in the contract allows him to receive written notice and a 5-day cure period to work out any issues. Now, obviously, this would relate to things like if he had not shown up to shows where he could obviously find a way of resolving that issue. it's very hard to resolve an issue of sexual allegations, particularly when you have female performers on your roster that may have came out as part of those allegations or may have privately declared that they also had issues with him. This is about creating a safe working place. What he's doing by suing Impact Wrestling is trying to manage the situation. And what he's likely done is found a lawyer that's no win, no fee, because he's thinking to himself, well, if I win and I get 10 million out of Impact, then I can pay 2-3 million to the lawyer. It's absolutely fine. I don't care. But he's probably looking at it like, if I don't win, I don't pay anything, but I've shown everybody that I've tried to fight this. I'm fighting my corner. He's a piece of shit, really. Suing Impact Wrestling, I don't really care about. He's arguing over whether they had the right to terminate his contract for being an abuser. That's semantics. There's no way they could put him on national television after what he did. Certainly no way they could continue to pay him as a legitimate company. He claims, though, that the allegations, which are false, despite very, very detailed statements and evidence and witnesses to some things, and he says that he's losing $20,000 a month. Bear in mind, the pandemic is why you're not working, jackass. Of course, the fact that you're also a sexual predator and an abuser, things that you've partially admitted to in your video, but decided that the worst things you're not going to admit to, even though some of the people who've actually come forward about allegations are not known as liars. They're relatively trustworthy people, and they're not gaining anything financially from this. In fact, the pandemic means nobody's working. Everybody's losing money. He posted a video statement where he addressed his Impact Wrestling status and said there was a clause in the contract that says he can't be fired for any actions that took place prior to signing that deal. He claims that since all of the accusations allegedly took place before he signed the deal, he was considering legal action. So basically, all of the allegations against him that came out are prior to him signing with Impact Wrestling. That's all the ones that came out, though. Like I said earlier, there may be accusations that will come out down the line that revolve around things that happened after he signed for Impact Wrestling. This is one thing that's going to play out over the next few months. Certainly, if you're accused of things like this and your first instinct is simply to sue people, then you're wrong. If you didn't do anything and you can clear your name, then great. But you clear your name legitimately, not by suing people for money. Because if that's what it's all about, it proves the point I made. Now, several months ago, I wrote an article about the dick flip guy, about how he is somebody who epitomizes what is wrong with wrestling today. And it's not necessarily the high-flying moves, although I'm not a huge fan of 20 flips in a single match. They need to mean something. But that's just me. It's not about that. For me, here's a guy who made people touch his crotch. People were taking their kids to shows who didn't know he was going to be there. They certainly weren't buying tickets to see this jackass. And then their kids now have all these questions and assume, because they've seen this on a wrestling show, that it's okay. And yes, parents have a responsibility to teach their children. But you can tell your kids 100 times, don't wrestle in the backyard. They still do it because they want to be cool. If you see Joey Ryan doing it, then you want to be cool. Now, bear in mind all of the issues about a certain film that went on to Netflix a couple of weeks ago that sexualizes young people. If you're attending shows where young people are, and it's okay, it's one thing to do at shows where it's adults only. Those shows, people sign up knowing that shit's going to get a bit real. But Joey Ryan was doing this stuff at shows with kids. I actually spoke to a promoter who told him, this is a kid. I'm not going to mention the promoter's name. He's no longer involved in wrestling promoting. He has sold up and left the business. He's just sick of it all. But he told me that when he booked Joey Ryan, he said, this show's going to have kids. It's going to have adults. So we can tease your gimmick, but we're going to have to find a way of making sure that you don't do everything you do. He showed up with the lollipop. He did everything that he is known for, and told the promoter, well, the fans went home happy, apart from the kids who couldn't understand it, and the parents who came and asked for their money back. And this promoter friend of mine was out about £400 because people actually did ask for their money back. They were sickened by it. And these were not ultra-conservative people. These were people who were shouting and swearing during the show. They had a line. Joey Ryan apparently doesn't. And if you're unsure about my opinion of Joey Ryan, I've never liked this gimmick. I've always said Joey Ryan's a very good worker, though. Joey Ryan's a guy who, in the ring, can work. He knows psychology. But just like Sami Callihan, he stumbled into a clusterfuck and carried it on as a gimmick. The problem is at least Sami Callihan has tried to veer out of it. He has tried. I will actually... God damn it, I can't believe I'm doing this. I actually have more respect for Sami Callihan because he did use it, but realized he can't live off it. And Joey Ryan's living off that gimmick. There comes a point, especially when we're meant to all be woke, we're all meant to be more alert to these things that we say and we do, where we put this stuff on television, we put this stuff into our wrestling shows. We need to be more careful. We need to understand who's watching this. Anything that is taped can be watched by anybody. And if you put adult restrictions on it, that means nothing. I was watching Nightmare on Elm Street when I was 7 or 8 years old. Certainly not something I should have been watching. But you can. And that's the problem. Anyway, let's end on a slightly different note, because the wrestling news is a bit dark this week if I'm getting pissed off with Joey Ryan. I even complimented Sami Callihan. That's how angry Joey Ryan makes me. I'm sorry, but that's not acceptable. If somebody makes me actually praise Sami Callihan, then screw you. Never thought I would praise Sami Callihan. Anyway, there was an interesting thing that happened on Raw this week. There was a backstage segment, because obviously you had... We are going to talk about the draft properly, but let's talk about this briefly. We had the Street Profits drafted to SmackDown, and we had the New Day drafted to Raw. Now, the New Day were drafted to Raw after winning the SmackDown Tag Championships from Cesaro and Nakamura, and then the Street Profits were drafted to SmackDown. So the belts were on the opposite shows, and what they did, they had Adam Pearce, by the way, one of the best things about WWE right now, they had Adam Pearce actually say, well, listen, guys, let's just swap the belts. It saves any hassle. You then obviously had Dolph Ziggler and Robert Roode saying, well, wait a minute, we're meant to be having a title shot for the Raw Tag Championships tonight. Well, we're not going to get it. So they did get it. They just got it against the New Day. I said to producer Zoe Styles, I felt like WWE could just swap those titles around. I thought they were going to do the same with Drew and Roman Reigns. So I kind of half called that last week, but they did it with the tag titles instead. For me, it's very cool to see the titles not just kind of being rebranded every time a roster draft happens, but these guys swapped belts. For me, it was funny. They swapped, and they clearly weren't sure about it. And also, a member of the Street Profits may have had a name for his belt. And doesn't everybody have a name for their belts? I certainly have a name for all my belts. I'm not going to tell you what the names are, because it's between me and my belts and in a dark room. I'm not going to tell you the names, but everybody should have names for the belts they have in their collection, shouldn't they? I don't mean calling it the IC belt. I don't mean calling it the tag belt. Like girls' names. Like cars. That's what we should do. We should all name our things like we name our cars. Have I revealed too much? So last week, myself and Zoe decided that we were going to do some roster draft selections. Now, obviously, we didn't know exactly how many picks they were going to do, and the format for it hadn't been properly explained when we were recording. We just knew there was going to be 2 draft pools, so we kind of pulled together some picks from that. I'm going to speak to Zoe at the end, and we'll find out who actually got more correct overall. But what I want to do is let's do round by round the roster picks that everybody made. no special graphics. We're just going to talk about exactly what picks each brand had. So in round one, Raw took Drew McIntyre, Asuka, and the Hurt Business, which is a very good draft picks. Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins were the picks for SmackDown. We then move on to round two. AJ Styles, Naomi, and Nia Jax were drafted by Raw, and SmackDown drafted Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair, which looked like it was going to break up the Street Profits, and that was something that Zoe was a little bit worried about on Friday when she heard that. But we move on to round three. Ricochet, Mandy Rose, and The Miz and John Morrison drafted to Raw. Jey Uso and Rey Mysterio and Dominic Mysterio were drafted to SmackDown. Rey and Dominic being treated as one. That's very cool, though. It means the Seth Rollins-Rey story can kind of get that finale on SmackDown over the next little while. We then saw round four, The New Day, who were now holding the tag team championships. Dana Brooke and Angel Garza. Not the strongest of picks. Dana Brooke and Angel Garza. No slouches, obviously, but at the same time, not the big names that you would think. And then SmackDown chose Big E and Otis. So they still have the Money in the Bank on SmackDown, but they also broke up the New Day. So that's kind of interesting, and we wonder where that's going to go over the next little while. But this is what I've said all along. It doesn't have to be animosity when you break up a faction. It can just be expanding the brand. New Day are now on two separate shows, but hopefully Big E kind of drops the goofy New Day stuff and becomes a little bit more serious. This is an opportunity for him to acknowledge his positivity, but also become a more rounded character, somebody who could be a legitimate challenger for Roman Reigns. We then saw the next draft picks were Humberto Carrillo, Drew Gulak, and Tucker to Raw, and Murphy and Kalisto to SmackDown. Murphy has certainly improved over the last few weeks, been given some mic time, and has looked really strong. Hopefully that storyline with Aaliyah is going to continue, particularly with Seth and Rey and Dominic being on that brand. That certainly adds a little bit of value to having Murphy on that show. Kalisto, somebody who was on SmackDown anyway, so he's going to be familiar to the fans of the brand, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Now, let's move to Monday, and we instantly fired straight into a big draft pick for Raw, which was The Fiend, Bray Wyatt. We had Randy Orton and Charlotte Flair chosen as well. SmackDown chose Bayley and the Street Profits, so that kind of put in place that the Raw Tag Team Champions are moving to SmackDown. The SmackDown Champions have already moved over to Raw, and that led to them swapping the belts over later in the show. We then had in round two, Braun Strowman, Matt Riddle, and Jeff Hardy moving to Raw. SmackDown got Daniel Bryan and Kevin Owens. For me, Matt Riddle and Jeff Hardy, two great picks. Matt Riddle's questionable right now due to allegations, but in terms of if we, I don't want to use the word ignore. If you put the allegations to the side for a second, Matt Riddle has all the potential in the world. But now we can't ignore these allegations. We have to bring them back in. I think it could be 50-50 what happens with him. He could be somebody that WWE have to cut ties with sooner or later, particularly if more evidence comes out. And I'm not going to take sides in this. I wasn't trying to ignore the allegations. That's why I wanted to place them to one side. I certainly think Matt Riddle has potential to do a lot of good things. Just not so sure if WWE should be the ones to take that gamble. Anyway, we'll move on because the next round gives us somebody else who's having a little bit of controversy right now. So we have Retribution, Keith Lee, and Alexa Bliss to Raw. That continues the Fiend and Alexa Bliss storyline, which, by the way, on Raw had Alexa Bliss doing the bendy rope thing that the Fiend does. There's a lot of entertainment value in that, and I really liked it. But SmackDown picked Lars Sullivan and King Corbin. Now, Lars Sullivan under a cloud again after being outed as somebody who'd done gay porn, which, by the way, nothing wrong with that. If that's something he did and he was okay with it, great. He also happened to have homophobic messages on forums and several other things. Now, this week, it appears he's been kind of doing some controversial things again. Now, what I saw was him asking for a booty pic, which I don't think is massively controversial. I'm assuming that there's a lot more to that story, and I'm assuming that it wasn't just somebody asking for a booty pic. If it was, then there's a lot of guys out there right now who are probably thinking to themselves, I'm in a lot of trouble if anybody finds out that I've asked for a booty pic. I think there must be more to how this has been handled. Certainly don't go asking randoms for booty pics. I've asked my wife for a pic of her bum because, we're married and she can just say no and it's fine. I think Lars Sullivan, as somebody who has been through controversial things, certainly shouldn't be still doing these kind of things. Perhaps the internet isn't for him. He keeps getting himself into trouble. And that's why somebody like Lars Sullivan, who's already had anxiety attacks before he went on air, perhaps he's not the person that they need to be investing the next year in. The same with Matt Riddle. If there's controversy surrounding him of a nature like this, perhaps don't spend a year developing these guys as one of your big stars. Certainly not with the rumored plans being Lars Sullivan versus Braun Strowman next year. Anyway, let's not talk about the negativity, although we can't ignore it. It's important that we acknowledge that, Lars Sullivan, still more controversy surrounding this guy, and we've never seen him draw any money. If somebody like Shawn Michaels, who draws money, you can have a little bit of controversy when you draw money because people forget about it when you're over that much. They don't forget about allegations. They forget about controversy, like being a dick. They don't forget about things like sexual assault or harassment or, in Matt Riddle's case, allegedly rape. So WWE have to run this really tight line with these guys. And it's interesting because you rarely see these kind of stories coming out about the females. I mean, if there is any stories about the females, it's usually two girls not liking each other, which, by the way, happens. But with the guys, it always seems to involve sex. It always seems to involve people taking advantage of their position. And that's something that just, I don't understand the need to do it. I mean, it's one thing if you and your partner are asking for naughty pictures. I get it. That's something that couples do. But why are you going on? I believe with Lars Sullivan, he messaged a girl. He was a member of her OnlyFans. He messaged her on Instagram and asked for a booty pic. So the context is weird. Why would you do that? You're already paying to see her naked pictures. Just look at them. I mean, that's a consensual two-way relationship. She consents to putting them up. You consent to paying for them. Why go out of your way to ask for stuff away from that platform? I think that must be where the controversy happens with somebody like Lars Sullivan. And there's nothing wrong with OnlyFans. If people want to do that, then great. I certainly think people like Lars Sullivan, I think he just needs a lot of help. I just don't think he gets it. I don't think he understands what he's doing. Not an excuse, but I don't think anybody's told him what he's doing is wrong. Anyway, round 4 of the draft picks. Elias, Lacey Evans, and Sheamus to Raw. Elias made his presence known by showing up with a guitar and breaking it. I'm going to use a line that was used about Jeff Jarrett. He broke 1,000 guitars and never drew a dime. Elias is releasing an album at the end of October, and there's a concert next week on Raw. The guitar is not the star here. Elias is. He has the ability to talk. He's just been a bit injury prone, stop-start for the past year. Hopefully there's the ability to kick-start here. We flip over to SmackDown, who drafted Sami Zayn, Cesaro, and Shinsuke Nakamura. 3 great wrestlers to have on your show. And with Sami Zayn being the Intercontinental Champion, keeps the belt on that brand, which is really important. Now we move over to round 5. Nikki Cross, R-Truth, and Daba Kato. That allows them to continue the Nikki Cross, Alexa Bliss storyline potentially. R-Truth with the 24/7 belt, and Daba Kato and Braun Strowman have a little bit of a feud going on, so that'd be quite interesting. But we did see Dolph Ziggler and Robert Roode and Apollo Crews drafted to SmackDown, which kind of puts an end to the Hurt Business going after that little group of guys, particularly with Ricochet deciding on Raw basically to have a match against Cedric Alexander. And if Cedric Alexander won, he would join the Hurt Business. If Ricochet won, he would be left alone by the Hurt Business. And for anybody who hasn't seen it, we aren't talking about Raw and everything in great detail, but Ricochet did his homage to Eddie Guerrero, where he threw the steel chair at Cedric Alexander, and then he feigned that he'd been hit by it after smacking the ring. It was funny. It was entertaining. It made us think of somebody who is one of the greatest stars wrestling's ever produced. And at the same time, was a really nice way to separate these group of guys so that storyline doesn't continue. I certainly think Ricochet would benefit from joining the Hurt Business, but for now, at least, he's not there. The next round, very weak for Raw in this round, and the rest of the picks are actually quite weak for Raw. They got Titus O'Neil, Peyton Royce, and Akira Tozawa. Tozawa has been reduced to being a comedy character. Apparently, Vince McMahon's already lost interest in Peyton Royce, and Titus O'Neil is Titus O'Neil. He does nothing apart from bark occasionally. Kind of wasted picks, but there's a roster there to have to pick. SmackDown chose Carmella and Aleister Black. Very good choices as far as I'm concerned. And that leads into round 7, which was Lana, Riddick Moss, and Arturo Ruas. Arturo Ruas was on Raw Underground, which hasn't been on for a few weeks. He's very good, but quite old. Very different style. Very mixed martial arts style. So somebody who could be quite interesting if WWE were to try and go down a more serious route. Certainly Arturo Ruas versus Sheamus in a more street style fight would be quite entertaining. Lana, of course, won the #1 contender match, the Battle Royal on Raw, so she's going up against Asuka. That was after the breakup of Lana and Natalya, which is interesting because Natalya got drafted to SmackDown alongside the Riot Squad. Now, what's quite interesting is that we did see some tag team splits. The New Day split up. We also saw Heavy Machinery and Lucha House Party break up as well. The New Day and Street Profits obviously swapped their tag titles around after being drafted. Shorty G was added to the SmackDown roster, changed the name. He's Chad Gable. It's a stupid name. Never liked it. Hopefully, that's something that's going to really help Shorty G, is the chance to kind of be on that refresh brand. There's certainly a few good matches that he could be having. Certainly, if Shorty G was to replace Drew Gulak in that storyline with Daniel Bryan, the mentor angle would be very good, and Shorty G would benefit from it, especially if he changes his bloody name. Lucha House Party, Lince Dorado and Gran Metalik were added to Raw on Monday after they were not drafted. So that brings us to discussing who is left undrafted. So what we had was Andrade and Mickie James, who I discussed in the Wrestling News, both injured, weren't drafted. We also have people who weren't in the draft pool. So you have Becky Lynch, Jim Uso, Sonya Deville, Edge, Jinder Mahal, Samoa Joe, Mojo Rawley, The Forgotten Sons, Bo Dallas, Big Show, John Cena, Bill Goldberg, Ronda Rousey, and The Undertaker. It looks like Undertaker has retired, so potentially if he does come back, it'll be special appearances. It won't be as an active wrestler. But that leaves us with some interesting rosters. Let's put up each of the rosters right now so that we can see, based on the supplemental drafts and based on everything that's happened out with the 2 draft nights, how that leaves Raw and SmackDown. So having looked at both rosters, I think, yet again, Raw came out the better of the 2. I do think they have some of the bigger stars. I do, however, think that there is the opportunity on SmackDown for people like Aleister Black, Apollo Crews, Murphy to actually rise further up the card. And with people like Daniel Bryan, Kevin Owens ready to help prep Big E, Aleister Black, Apollo Crews, and Murphy for that next step, they have a very, very good future indeed, especially with the likes of Jey Uso and Otis, who for me, 2 guys who Vince loves. Otis, and Jey Uso has all the potential in the world. You've also got King Corbin as well, somebody who I actually really like. I don't know what it is he's missing. There's something, and as soon as he figures that out, King Corbin's going to be on fire. I think he's a great heel. When you look at the women's divisions, I think certainly in terms of overall talent, I think SmackDown have the better roster. Bayley, Sasha Banks, Bianca Belair, Carmella, Natalia, Billie Kay, Tamina, and Zelina Vega. They've got a very good, interesting roster there. Raw, on the other hand, Asuka and Charlotte are the two top talents in that roster. And it's a match we've seen countless times. Naomi, Alexa Bliss, Lacey Evans, Nikki Cross, Peyton Royce, and Lana. So there will be a lot of changes coming there. I certainly think SmackDown are going to have the better matches, the better quality matches. But having Nikki Cross on Raw every week, I'm a big fan of Nikki Cross. Having a Scottish girl on WWE is just cool for me. When we look at the tag teams, I would have to say I think SmackDown have that again. The New Day I like. Hurt Business, any combination of them I really like. Miz and Morrison. Miz is potentially a top guy if you book him correctly. Certainly could have good matches with Orton, with Riddle, with Jeff Hardy, Keith Lee, Ricochet. Morrison could have good matches with anybody. But then you've got Retribution, any combination there, and Lucha House Party. But you go over to SmackDown, they've got the Street Profits, Cesaro and Shinsuke Nakamura, Dolph Ziggler and Robert Roode, and Rey and Dominic Mysterio. Obviously, I think in the next wee while we're going to have some call-ups. I don't think these rosters are the finished article. I would love to see Undisputed Era on SmackDown. I would love to see one or two of the women from NXT getting called up. Certainly Rhea Ripley, Toni Storm, although I think Toni Storm's been built to kind of become a cornerstone of the NXT brand for a little while. I certainly think Rhea Ripley coming up would be a good deal for everybody concerned, and dropping her straight into the Raw division would shake things up. The history with Charlotte Flair, the ability for her to go in against Asuka, the ability for Rhea Ripley versus Naomi, I think would be a great, interesting match. So the WWE roster draft is as it is. And to be honest, I think both brands have benefited in certain areas. I do believe that the women division and the tag division on SmackDown are better than what Raw have. However, I do believe that the male division on Raw is stronger and overall more over than the SmackDown one. But I'm so excited to see what Aleister Black, Murphy, King Corbin, Big E, and Jey Uso are going to do to elevate their game, because Sami Zayn, Seth Rollins, Daniel Bryan, and Roman Reigns are guys that can really help these people get over. And you look at Raw, it does seem to be the big man show. So you have Drew McIntyre, Bobby Lashley, you have Braun Strowman, The Fiend, Keith Lee. The match type is going to be slower. It's going to be different. Perhaps SmackDown is going to have the more entertaining matches. So with SmackDown being creatively the better show in recent weeks, it's going to be interesting to see what these changes actually do. And I have been told there are rumors that there may be some trades coming as well. So that could be quite interesting, particularly if over the coming weeks, creative realize perhaps they're a little bit weak in certain areas. So for me, I think SmackDown's won in terms of making it the most exciting of these two shows, but Raw has probably got the better end of the bargain in terms of having the bigger stars. And that's just my opinion. Okay, so we've just went over the draft. Now, obviously, in your absence, I couldn't pick your brain as we were going about which ones you liked and which ones you disliked, but there were 84 picks, men, women, tag teams, and groups over the two-day draft. Raw were receiving 3 picks and SmackDown 2 picks per round. And one of the interesting things that I do want to talk about is I want to mention the ones that you got right, and I want to mention the ones that I got right. We won't be negative and talk about what we got wrong, because that just seems like we're focusing on the bad stuff. So you got Elias, AJ Styles, Naomi, Nikki, Alexa, Matt Riddle, Natalia, and Aleister Black's Final Destinations correct. I got the New Day, kinda. Bray Wyatt, Alexa Bliss, John Morrison and The Miz, The Street Profits, and Kevin Owens, and Bianca Belair correct, right? So, adding up my score, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, if you include Bianca Belair, and you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So on the roster draft, you got one more correct than I did. If I don't break New Day up into 2. But you won. Congratulations. There's no prize other than pride. But how do you
Which is a
feel
very
getting
big
it
thing
right?
in our house.
Yeah, how do you feel getting it right? I know you couldn't join me on the show, but I thought I better call you and tell you that you won. Otherwise, they'll think I'm trying to hide it from you.
It's a nice change. I mean, normally, like, we've made jokes before that we think WWE are hiding microphones in the house because the amount of times you say something and then within 6 months it happens is a little disturbing.
Well, guest appearance from our son on this week's show. However, congratulations. Thank you for taking part in the roster draft. And we will hopefully see you next week where I have a really fun plan for your homework. Do you want to hear it just now?
No, we'll leave it as a surprise. I enjoy homework, because I'm a geek.
Okay, well, what we'll do is I'll kick you off and I'll tell everybody else exactly what is your homework. So thank you for joining us. We will see you later, Zoe. Right. So now we've got rid of the wife, the producer. Her homework for next week is we're going to get her to go and watch the old WWF music videos. Now, the WWF music videos, I think we're going to not get her to watch one because that's kind of lame. So we're going to get her to watch several. So she's going to watch stuff from the Pile Driver album. She's going to watch stuff from the WrestleMania album. And we're going to see exactly what happens there. So one of the things that I do want people to understand is that when I give Zoe homework to do, she can't just watch it and kind of make it up on the fly. She has to spend all of her time doing it. So she's got 20 or 30 music videos to watch, including, hopefully, The Undertaker singing on a song. I say singing, it's more like talking in a dead man style. But that's Zoe Styles' homework for next week, and she will hopefully be very good at it. So this is the part that we get to that I'm not entirely happy with, but as was revealed the other week, Caledonian Wrestling Federation are sponsoring the show. There is at least one segment of every show that is going to involve the CWF going forward. I haven't been told exactly how long that's going to last for, and I'm aware that that's going to cause trouble for my relationship with JJ Andrews, who I've been friends with for 20 years plus. So, on that note, we do have a video that's been sent in by Murphy that is going to be the CWF segment this week. I've also been given a scripted read to do by Stuart Murphy. I'm sure that's going to be very well written with grammar in all the correct places. But the plan over the next few weeks is that CWF are going to sponsor a different segment of the show every week, and they may possibly send in reads or videos because apparently they do have a lot of plans coming up, even though they can't get shows on the go. So let's do the read, which I have been sent here. We here at the CWF would like everybody to know that transparency is the most important thing to us. On that note, I have already revealed myself as the owner, Stuart Murphy, but in the next few weeks, we will let everybody see our registration at company's house so everybody can see exactly who is behind the company. We are going to make sure the contact information for the management team is available to everybody. We are also, as a company, going to reach out to all the other promotions that are going to be in the areas that we want to book shows in to let them know we are not here as an enemy. We are here to give people an extra place to work. In addition, we hope to build a friendly working relationship with as many promotions as possible, and we want all of these promotions to give us as much advice as possible. At the end of the day, we want people to work and we want people to be safe. This is probably the most intelligent thing Murphy has ever written. I can't believe that the words that I've just read off this page were written by Stuart Murphy. But it's good to hear that he wants to have a friendly relationship with other promotions, and it's good to hear that he wants to be open and honest. If he wants to be open and honest, though, why did he avoid coming on the show for as long as he did? All he had to do was come on. he messaged me after his appearance and said he really enjoyed being on the show. He actually got a kick out of being interviewed. He enjoyed it. So I don't know. I think he's maybe just getting too into the character of the evil boss, but he is the person sponsoring this show. So for the next little while, he is going to be either putting on videos or doing announcements of some kind on the show. He has told me in our chat that he is going to give us the official announcement for the first show when that happens. He's going to give us the official announcement for the matches that are coming on that show. And in addition to that, we hopefully will be directed towards some of the talent that are going to be working his show as well. So we'll have some additional interviews coming as well. The negative of having a sponsor like CWF is having to deal with Stuart Murphy, the evil character. But the positives is that we can actually get to talk to some wrestlers that are working shows. And hopefully, when the travel bans are all over and everything's somewhat normal again, we can actually attend these shows and we can show you some exclusive clips, perhaps have some interviews with talent. Anyway, this is Headlocks and Headphones. 100% want you to know that whatever Stuart Murphy says in this video, we do not condone it, and we certainly do not endorse it.
Headlocks and Headphones does not endorse this advert, but is damn sure approved by CWF. Headlocks and Headphones. I'm outside at my old stomping ground where I used to do backyard wrestling. Now Martin, I want to address you specifically because you seem to have a problem with me and my company sponsoring the show. But after talking very long conversation with your producer Zoe Styles, she made me realise that this is the right move. She agrees with what you want to do here, and more importantly, I agree with what you and her are doing with Headlocks and Headphones, and I think it's a great idea. However, you still decide to have subtle digs at me. That's fine. But I think that's just because you have a hatred for me because you go back a long time with JJ Andrews, and that also is fine. But you've now passed that hatred of me on to your producer, who's never even met me in person. So she even thinks I'm a bad guy, so hopefully this sponsorship will show her otherwise. Now, I mentioned JJ Andrews earlier. I've not heard from him in a while. I'm guessing that means he's no longer interested, which is a shame, really. I was going to give him what he wants. I was going to invite him to have a face-to-face sit-down with me in the ring at our very first show. Clearly, though, he's obviously not that interested anymore. So that can no longer happen. Now, more about the sponsorship deal and why I approached your producer in regards to me sponsoring your show. It came to my attention really that, I don't know if I should tell you this. It's not really my place to tell you this. But you deserve to know. You're a nice guy, you deserve to know. The reason I send the sponsorship is I heard that Headlocks and Headphones may soon be looking for a new host. Do you know anything about that, Martin? God, I hope I've not stirred the hornet's nest, but I may want to talk to your producer about that. Oh, and what happened to that sit-down meeting we spoke about on Twitter? Or have you finally came to your senses and realised that you are batting well above your average when it comes to me? But anyway, it's nice to be on a show which I sponsor, and will pretty soon be mine. I'll see you soon.